Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Baker. I'm the president of Constructive Solutions. I wanted to first off thank you for your time today. We're providing, we have, I think, 28 companies and 39 people in attendance today. So maybe 20 of the companies or 19 of the companies are current Timberscan clients, and there's 8 or 9 companies, clients of ours as Constructive Solutions that use Sage 300 CRE that are also in attendance. So I've asked Mike Carbonneau, who's the Director of Sales or Vice President of Sales for Core & Associates, is going to be leading the presentation today. Given the mix of clients, we're sort of going to, for those that aren't familiar with Timberscan, we're going to provide a high-level overview of the different parts, and then Mike's going to feature some of the complementary solutions that have evolved over time in the Timberscan suite of applications to, talk about how our existing Timberscan clients are further deploying certain modules and additional capabilities that Core has developed over time. So I would encourage all of you, if there are questions that come up, because it's such a large audience, I have everybody muted. I would encourage you to use the chat to record any questions that you have, and I'll make sure to monitor the chat and we can address those questions as they come up. And probably at the end of the presentation, what we'll try and do is unmute everybody and we'll try and leave 5 minutes for Q&A. So, Mike?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Patrick. I greatly appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. So as Patrick said, obviously with the mix of current scan clients and also companies that might be interested in perhaps implementing Timberscan, with that mix, what I will try to do is I'll try to blend a combination of both providing knowledge to those who are not using Timberscan, some of the key aspects of the system, with also mixing in new features that perhaps companies who are even current Timberscan clients are not familiar with. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a brief PowerPoint presentation, a few slides here that will just kind of set things up, talk a little bit more about where we came from and where we are today, and then we'll go right into the product, and I'm going to spend the better part of the next 45 to 50 minutes going through the application in quite a bit of detail. So, the idea behind what Core Associates is, I would say that this is our mission, if you will, is to create a suite where it becomes a complete purchase-to-pay solution where you never have to touch the paper. That is our goal. Now, obviously, that might seem like it's somewhat unrealistic, but as we kind of go through the application, I'm going to hopefully show you some ways that you can eliminate a lot of the data entry and a lot of the handling of paper. So if we're talking about accounts payable invoices, just for example, we have a program called Email Monitoring and Acquire Automation. It eliminates the idea of having to receive invoices in the mail, so that if you can have those invoices emailed, we have a way that we can go about auto-acquiring them, and I'll talk about that. Also, with respect to invoicing, we have the ability to use optical character recognition of those invoices. So again, eliminating a lot of the data entry that takes place and the handling of the paper in that respect, where I'm not having to look at a document and then key in the information. A lot of it will be, completely eliminated from, with the OCR component. Project-centric mobile approvals. So with respect to that, we have what we consider an industry-leading AP automation system. We created this AP workflows system around Sage 300. So everything that you see as we go through this application, it was designed specifically to fit and work with Sage 300. This Timberscan does not work with any other product. It's not a generic application that would tie to another ERP system. It was designed specifically for Sage. Approvals on the go. We have an application called Timberscan Go, where clients can approve invoices using any type of mobile device that they want. So we'll talk about that. But Timberscan has gone beyond the boundaries of AP invoice routing and approval. We have an application called AIM, Advanced Image Management, that is a full document management system. So it allows for any client to not only manage their AP invoices and supporting documents, but any other type of document that they want to manage as well. So if they want to store human resource documents, project management documents, any of those things are possible, and they can retain them in one central repository so that you're not having to go search for documents in various different places. And then also, we have developed a series of cloud solutions that are an extension of Timberscan. So while Timberscan presently is we'll call it a server-based application, it's installed on your server and you run it from your server. We also have an application called Core Cloud Systems, which allows you to do things like field purchasing and receiving, timesheets, credit card expenses, and reconciliation. So that's all built into and built around the Timberscan application. We'll talk about that as we get a little bit further into this, and I'll show you some things that at least you can consider if you wanted to, if you're a current Timberscan client and you want to expand the use of Timberscan to see, and to be able to use other parts of your organization, allow them to be able to use the application. You'll be able to see that here. Even if you're not using Timberscan, I think you'll find that some of these things provide a nice complement to the Timberscan application. And then we talk about purchase to pay. So we have a relationship with Avid Exchange, which is a product, they've developed a product called Create a Check. They have an Avid portal. And we basically link to that in a very simple, very easy way, so that in essence, what you could do is you could take an invoice, and once that invoice has been posted and you processing the checks, if you're using a product like Create a Check, for example, again, there's no handling of the paper. Everything can be done electronically, and it can be processed through Timberscan, and I'll show you the end result once the invoices and checks have been processed. Okay, so what is Timberscan? It started as an AP routing and approval application that was designed back in 2004. So we've been around about 15 years. We have in total over 2,000 clients, and we have over 30,000 actual users of Timberscan. So it's a well-vetted system. It's a full enterprise content management system. So I was talking about Timberscan AIM, the ability to store all of your documents and content in one place, in a central repository. It provides optical character recognition, so Timberscan Capture, allowing you to be able to OCR your AP invoices. Mobile approval of AP invoices with Timberscan Go. So we will talk about that, and we'll cover that application as well. And then the cloud-based programs that we talked about. It's a forms tool at its core. Core Cloud Systems is a forms tool where you can just set up your own forms, and you can manage those forms if you want. But built around the idea of forms are certain applications that we've built to allow you to do things like credit card reconciliation, remote time entry, and also field purchasing. Again, I mentioned the whole idea of Create a Check being that you could take information from the ERP system, run everything through Create a Check, and again, because of our link that we have in Timberscan, which I'll show you when we get a little bit further into this, you could process your payments without having to handle any paper along the way. This is our vision. This is basically what Timberscan looks like today. It is, as I mentioned, Timberscan on the server, where we have the AP routing and approval application with a number of features around it, things like Timberscan Capture for OCR, Acquire Automation, which I'm going to talk about, a little bit further here in a few moments. And then we have built around that our cloud-based and mobile applications that all work and, basically hand in hand with Timberscan. And all of this is accessing information directly from Sage 300 CRE. So just to kind of summarize, one system, one platform, one data entry point seamlessly integrated with Sage, automated workflow automation from PO to routing and approval of AP invoices, and all documents using rules-based routing. As I mentioned, 2004 is when the company started, over 2,100 clients and 30,000 users. I know I've said this a couple of times. I think it bears repeating, designed exclusively for Sage 300 CRE. And I'll show you some things that I think will indicate the fact that it was designed specifically for that. And then the ability to have electronic invoice packets that you can see not only in Timberscan, but also in Sage 300 CRE. Okay, last screen before we actually get into the application. So this is a workflow depiction of AP invoices as they travel through Timberscan. Now, I'm not going to go into a detailed demonstration like I normally would if we were working with someone who's not using Timberscan presently on a kind of a one-on-one demonstration. I'll keep it high level, but this workflow basically works for everything that is built not only in Timberscan, but around Timberscan, and I'll explain that in a second. So with respect to AP invoices, what we're talking about is acquiring the invoice documents into Timberscan. They become an electronic document. Once they're there, the data entry takes place in Timberscan. Our data entry grid replicates that of Sage 300 CRE. All of the fields are laid out in the exact same order, and they function the same way as they do in Sage 300. So from an implementation of AP perspective, it makes it very simple and very easy to key in invoices and start processing them in Timberscan. Routing those invoices off to the approvers through rules-based routing. They get to the approver has the ability to use a mobile device. In this case, it's a Timberscan Go to be able to approve their invoices. The final review step is designed primarily for accounting, I would say. I think for the most part, this would be someone in accounting who's looking at the invoices after they've been through the approval process. And then once they've been approved, they get passed seamlessly to Sage 300 CRE. The invoices get posted in Sage 300 CRE, and your financials are updated. When the checks are cut, again, we have the ability to attach the check to the invoice, regardless of whether you're printing them out on check stock or you're using something like Create a Check, and then we can just attach them electronically. Ultimately, it creates a packet in Sage 300 that you can also see in Timberscan, where you're able to see the invoice, any of the supporting documents, and the check all together. Now, the reason I said that this workflow concept works for everything that's associated with Timberscan is because this is exactly the same concept and the same workflow process that you can deploy for any type of document. So if you were in Timberscan AIM, for example, and you wanted to start acquiring documents into AIM, they could be human resource documents. They could be whatever type of document they are. You can create business rules and workflows for those documents, and they can be routed for review and approval. And they can have attachment links to Sage 300 as well. This same workflow concept can work for all of our cloud-based solutions, like, for example, credit cards. So if you're processing credit card receipts through core cloud systems, and then you want to be able to send those receipts off to someone for review and approval, you can do so. Ultimately, everything gets updated into Timberscan, and it also can be pushed to Sage 300 CRE as kind of the end point for everything, if you will. Okay, so with that, I'm going to break out of the PowerPoint and we're going to go into the system. And again, I know this is tricky. I know that we have several folks who are current Timberscan clients, so I don't want to bore you, but I'm going to hopefully show you some things here or talk about some things that maybe you're not using today. And then for the benefit of those who are not using Timberscan, I'll provide you with a bit of an overview of the system as we go. So I've already logged into Timberscan. You basically can select an icon like I have here on my desktop, and it will take you through your security credentials to a screen that looks like this. So the Timberscan master menu, from a navigation perspective, you have these applications across the top. As you choose any of these, it brings up the various functions that are associated with that application. So I went into the reports menu, and I've brought up, my various reports that I can run if I want to provide me with a status of where invoices are, analytics, turnaround times, any of those things. So what I did was I opened up Timberscan and I opened up my dashboard as well. The dashboard is somewhat user definable, and I'll explain that in a second. But I consider the dashboard kind of you might call it a first thing in the morning view, a 20,000 foot view. What I'm doing is I'm just looking by certain criteria, by vendor, by days to discount, by job, for example. What invoices are outstanding at this point? And then if I hover the mouse on the pie chart, I can start to display the number of invoices by, for example, by vendor or by job. And it gives me the tooltip that allows me to see this information. Now, when I say user definable, what I mean is over here on the right-hand side, the far right-hand side, I can open this up and we have several graphs in a library that I could deploy if I want to. I've only selected to see these particular 6 graphs or panels that you see here, but I could change and I could flip to a different format and I could see something else if I want to. So it's basically just selecting which ones I want to see and then saving those changes, and then this is the graph that I'm looking at. So the dashboard is an option that you can choose to look at anytime you want. If you want to just get it out of the way so it's not kind of cluttering up the main body of the Timberscan application, you just click on the Hide Dashboard button and it just goes away. Okay, so let's talk about acquiring invoices. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is basically where everything starts, right? So invoices come in, and there are several ways in which you can go about getting the invoices into the system, but it all starts with the acquire function here. So with acquire, I choose the option acquire images. It opens up this viewer. Now, of course, there are several ways you can do this. So if I had a document that was sitting on my desktop or maybe in a file or a folder, or maybe it's an emailed invoice that I just want to grab the attachment, you can just take the attachment, drag and drop, and you can open it like this. If I wanted to, look at it more closely, you can zoom in and zoom out. You can also use the wheel of your mouse, like I'm doing now, and I can just size the document on the screen. So rather than having to use that zoom in and zoom out tool, I find the wheel of the mouse is a much easier way to just be able to size it if I need to. You can split the documents if you need to. You can just right-click, for example. I can say insert a break. So now I've separated these. This is invoice 1 and this is invoice 2. Now, so drag and drop is an option. Scanning, for the most part, most companies have a network scanner. You would scan to a network file, and then all you have to do in Timberscan is just open that particular file. Those scanned invoices are sitting in the file. You can just grab them, sweep through, open them up. You can take a whole stack of invoices that you just scanned into a file, open them all together, and they open up into the viewer the same way. So let's talk about the email monitoring and the acquire automation tool, because that's something that even some current Timberscan clients may not be taking advantage of. So the way that the email monitoring program works is you designate an AP email address. So, a lot of companies today have decided that they want to set up an AP email address that they've asked their vendors and subs to email invoices to. So when the invoices come into that particular inbox, what Timberscan can do, And this is done, basically this is just part of the application. We can actually monitor that email address. And what happens is that we're going to take the attachment from that particular email and we will drop it into a file. So it's almost the same thing that happens when it gets scanned. Instead of an actual hard copy document being scanned to a file and becoming an electronic image, now what we're doing is we're taking an email attachment and we're dropping it into a file. So then again, here in Acquire, all someone has to do is just look, okay, so let's say these were my emailed invoices. They came into the file. I just click the open button and they just open up into the viewer the same way as if I had scanned or dragged and dropped them. And I just took that whole stack of invoices and they're now all in here together. Okay, so let's talk about Acquire automation, which goes one step further. So what email monitoring does is it allows me to monitor an email address and drop invoices into a file or a folder that I would then open and pull out of the file here in the Timberscan Acquire screen. What Acquire automation does is it allows you to define that same concept, but instead of taking the invoices and putting them into a file where you then have to open the file and acquire them in the Acquire screen, it goes one step further. It actually goes two steps further. It bypasses the Acquire screen altogether. So someone doesn't have to come in here and constantly click out here and say, okay, what came in, now what's sitting in the file that I need to open up? Instead, it skips past the entire Acquire process altogether. And it sends the invoices directly to data entry, to the data entry person or data entry group that would be keying those invoices in. So now what happens is there's a little bit of setup on the front end that needs to take place to be able to specify certain information, like, for example, who these invoices are going to be sent to, who will be processing them, and also, how we recognize to be able to, if this were a multi-page document, how do I recognize where the separation is in the document and where do we go to the next invoice, for example. So once that's defined, what happens is that the Acquire automation tool bypasses the entire Acquire step and takes invoices and puts them right into the invoice entry queue. So some of the invoices that I have in here are invoices that were acquired by bypassing Acquire altogether and going right into invoice entry. So I'm going to expand on that in just a moment. And I'm going to talk about one other thing that will happen that you can deploy that will eliminate the acquiring and also the data entry. So that basically that invoice, from the time that it comes in by way of email, can be sitting in the data entry queue already coded. But before I do that, for the benefit of those people who are not using Timberscan, I'm just going to take a moment and I just wanted to show you the invoice entry screen and highlight a couple of things that I think are important. So the way that this works is I have the data entry screen in front of me where I have the invoice image at the top. I have the data entry grid down here at the bottom. You can move this out of the way. So if, for example, I have a second screen and I want to just, unhook this, slide it over to the second screen. That way I can have the image in full view in front of me, and I can just take this data entry grid and I can make this as large or small as I want to on the other side. The other thing is, as I said before, this is a replication. This is the exact same data entry grid that you have in Sage 300. Functions the exact same way. If I want to just go out and search my vendor file, I'm now searching the vendors from Sage 300. All of the master files that I would be searching, the vendor, the job, the cost code, the GL account code. The way that the system works is it basically syncs the data back and forth so that I'm just going through and I'm searching right from the master file. I don't have to set up any new master files or anything like that. What we did is we added address to the vendor search, because a lot of times you may have a vendor with multiple addresses, and we feel like it just makes it easier to be able to go, sort and group them if you want this way. And then, of course, you can type in key search letters, go find power equipment rental. If you're using compliance, you'll get these compliance warnings. Another thing, and this is really where I kind of wanted to highlight one of the key aspects of the system, is if it's a duplicate invoice, like it is in this case, it stops me immediately. It doesn't wait for me to get this invoice processed and sent off for review and approval. And when we're ready to update Sage 300, we find out that we have a duplicate invoice. It knows already that we have a duplicate invoice. And here's where things really get powerful. So now from here, if I don't even want to leave the invoice entry screen, but I want to be able to find out when we processed invoice 24011 previously. I can click on this history button, and now I have a list of all of the invoices for that vendor. It's laid out in an Excel spreadsheet format, and you can use this like Excel. So if I just click on one of the column headings, like the status, I now sort by that column. I can sum these totals. You can even export this to Excel if you want. With the duplicate invoice, I find it right here. I can see some of the basic information about like the invoice date, the accounting date, when it was paid if it was. And then if I click on the detail button, I can see how it's been coded. Something else that I think is very powerful about Timberscan. So I'm seeing what commitments, what jobs, what cost codes, and what have you were charged on this particular invoice. But if I hover the mouse on the commitment, the job, the cost code, the category, I can see a tooltip that provides me with additional information related to that field. For example, if I hover the mouse on the commitment, I can see the original committed amount, any change orders, what's been paid, what's been invoiced in the balance. If I hover the mouse on the job, I can see the revised contract amount of the job and the job to date billings. On the cost code, I can see what we've invoiced on the cost code and how it compares against the revised estimate. Same thing with the cost category. These tooltips are available everywhere in Timberscan that you hover the mouse on these fields, not just on this screen. So again, it's pulling this information right from Sage 300 and allowing me to see it right on the screen rather than me having to go search or run a report or do an inquiry or any of those things. And then, of course, you also have a record of the invoice. So it's sitting out here where I have the invoice image. Someone put a sticky note on it. I have all of the supporting documents, including, in this case, a purchase order that have been attached to it. And with every invoice after it's been acquired and processed in Timberscan, you have something called the approval page. This is something that's built automatically behind the scenes. And what it is it's an audit log that's showing me everything associated with this invoice, when it happened and who did it. So when it was received, when it was entered, who approved it, who was the final reviewer, who posted this in Sage 300. All this information is compiled. It's all available to me at my fingertips. But if I jump back here to the invoice entry screen and I just continue on, I'm going to go just a little bit further here before we finish this up and we go on to my next topic here. But I want to show one other thing here. If you have and you're processing invoices against a commitment, a multi-line commitment allows me to go ahead and select the line items. So I can just pull this up. And if this were, this could be 100 lines. I can selectively go down through and choose which commitment lines I want to process. If I want to choose all, I just select at the top and say all. And then as I say OK here, it then allows me to start pulling up those line items automatically right from the commitment. When let me pull this up also over here on the right-hand side. If the, what you're getting is you're getting a summary over here, and if the balance goes negative, it will start to highlight that for you and let you know that it's gone negative. You can also, obviously make any changes that you need to any of these fields. If I'm ready to go ahead and approve if I'm ready to go ahead and send this invoice off for approval, all I have to do is accept the invoice and Timberscan routes it off for approval based on the business rules that you have set up behind the scenes. So that's one of the first things that happens when Timberscan gets implemented is you build these business rules. They're meant to reflect how you route invoices. So if you said, well, what we normally would route to the project manager or project super on the job, then you can go ahead and just build the business rule to reflect that, accept the invoice, and then you're on to the next invoice. Now, obviously, there are other things and other controls you can do here. You can process joint payees through here. You can attach supporting documents. So anything that may have been indexed to this vendor or job would be available to me, and I can just go ahead and attach it. Something that perhaps some of the current Timberscan clients may not know. You can drag and drop a document right to this screen and attach it that way if you want. So if I had, even if it were an email correspondence, I can just go ahead and I can just drag that particular a document or a correspondence right to the screen, and I can attach it. So if I were having, a conversation back and forth maybe about this particular project, and I wanted to make sure that it got attached to that invoice, you could drag that whole email conversation right to here, and then you can just go ahead and attach it, and it then attaches to the invoice right from there. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to back out of this invoice entry screen and just talk about one of the other key features. And I'm going to skip back to what I was talking about before, Acquire Automation. So where we left Acquire was when I said you can use Acquire Automation to be able to bypass the entire invoice entry process, the entire Acquire process, and send invoices right to the entry queue. What you can also do, if you're using Timberscan Capture, is you can allow for the invoice to bypass the Acquire step, but also come into the entry queue pre-coded. So basically what Timberscan Capture does is it allows you to set up templates. So I'm going to show you an example of a template here. And basically what you do on the template is you define, I'll call it certain coordinates or zones that you want to be able to retrieve. So for example, I want to retrieve and populate the invoice number for this particular vendor. So it's just a matter of defining where it is on the document, and then I can size it, but I kind of move on from there. Invoice date, I've defined that particular field as being here. Balance due, I've defined down here. You can also set up defaults. So not only can I retrieve information from the actual document itself, but you can set up defaults for your vendors. One of the things, if you think about this, when you key in an invoice, what are the four primary things that have to be keyed in initially? The vendor number, the invoice number, the date, and the amount. I can get the invoice number, the date, and the amount off of the actual invoice. But I can't get the vendor number because HD Supply is not putting their vendor code on here. That's something that you've built in Sage 300. But what you can do through invoice coding is you can save their vendor code with the template and any other defaults that you want to apply, so that it will apply it every time you acquire an invoice for that vendor. So what does that allow us to do? So with a template, what that does is you could have a scenario where an invoice comes in through a designated AP email address. It completely bypasses the acquire step. It goes directly to invoice entry. And then in invoice entry, instead of me having to go through and key in all of the information, here's my invoice that came in automatically right from the email, and it's already pre-coded. The vendor number, the invoice number, the date, the amount, the description, all of this information came from the combination of Acquire Automation, when I said I wanted to pull it from an email, and Timberscan Capture. So now those products, in essence, are, you can have them work separately, or you can combine them so that you're eliminating the entire step of having to handle paper on the front end and acquire the invoice, and also handle the data entry where I have to go through and key all this information. It's already processed for me, and I could, in this case, I might be able to, if I have enough information here, go ahead and accept the invoice and send it off for review and approval. Okay. I'm going to jump over to the approval side in just a moment. I know that this is probably repetitive for the folks that are current Timberscan clients, but we do have a whole series of reports and inquiries that you can run. I always like to highlight this invoice status report because it's something that gives you on kind of the front end my total number of invoices that are outstanding and the total dollar amount. But it has drill down capability. So if I want to drill further in, now I can see where they're located. And if I wanted to focus in on Robert Jones, he has 18 invoices that he's sitting on. How long has he had them? I can drill further in, and now I see when they were assigned. I have all the information, pertinent information about the invoice, and I could call up the invoice image if I wanted as well. One other thing I'll also highlight is in the inquiries, we have a job cost inquiry. If you were doing any, let's just say, for example, time and material or cost plus billings, or maybe for a loan draw or something like that, you needed to be able to compile all of the AP invoice backup to support any of those situations. Typically, what most clients do when they're not using Timberscan is they have to pull all those AP invoices out of a file or make copies of them and then attach them to a T&M bill or something like that. Through the inquiry, what I can do, now, for my particular sample data, I'm going to say all dates. But what you could do is you could put in a date range. I could say, give me all of my invoices for a particular job for the month of, let's say, August or July. So I'll say everything for job 03001. Whoops, right here. It compiles this list for me. There's a lot of information in this particular spreadsheet. If you want, if I just right click, for example, as I get in here to the columns, I can include or exclude or create a range of columns that I want to include. So, maybe I want to use all of these. I just want to use certain, certain items here. So you have those options. But the key point is here over on the right-hand side, I have all of my invoice images. And I can call them up, but if I want, I can just click on this report menu, and it allows me to download those images. So in a matter of seconds, I can compile a list of all of my invoices that I need to support any of those situations like I mentioned before, and then attach them by simply downloading them in a matter of seconds. All right, so let's switch hats for a moment. I'm now become an approver. So this is Timberscan Go. For those clients who are Timberscan clients, and also for anyone who's not a Timberscan client, this is something that you may not be taking advantage of right now that you might want to. It's a very easy and very handy tool to work with. So what I've done is I've logged in using a web browser, and I've logged into kind of the front screen of Timberscan Go. We have I'll call it just a dashboard, if you will, that lets me see, in a snapshot, how many invoices do I have that I need to approve. These are my primary invoices. You could also be an alternate approver for someone else, which I happen to be, but I don't have anything in my alternate queue. And also, here are my invoices on hold. So let me see what's going on with those invoices. I click on primary, and now it calls up the invoices in a format that you see here. If I decided, you know what, and again, this is something that you can turn on or off for approvers if you want administratively. But let's say that I have enough information right here on this front screen that I don't need to dig into the details about this Weber's invoice. Dollar amount checks out. I can just click on the approve screen. Boom, it's done. If I need to dig, and again, when I say turn on or off, administratively, if you didn't want your approver to be able to just go through here and go approve, 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 you can shut this off. Now, if I want to dig into the details, I just touch the invoice. First thing that happens is any invoice notes that were associated with the invoice pop up first. I see those. I bring up the invoice image. I have my annotation tools here. I'll just choose my distributions here. It looks like there's just one distribution. I'll call it up. I see how the commitment info, my job, my cost code, my category. If I want to see those tooltips that I referred to before, you just touch on the little I button here. And now I see, for example, my commitment info. Same thing with the job. So I can, again, the job to date billings and all the other info here. Let's say that I decide I want to add a new line item. Very easy. Go ahead and do that. I'll call up my job info. I'll say what job it's associated with. It's starting to pull up all my cost codes for that job. And then I can just say, I want to charge it to a particular cost code and continue on forward with my coding here. Now, let's say I haven't talked about the save button here. I'm just going to work my way across. But I'll explain this in a second. So let's say I'm ready to go ahead and approve the invoice. Now what happens is that Timberscan Go is, it's tracking all of the various things that I've done along the way. So what did I do? I put an annotation on the document because I drew a line on it. And I made some data changes. I put in a description. I modified some of the coding. So the system is saying, okay, is that what you want to do? That you save this information before we continue or not? That's what the whole save button concept is all about. We're processing an invoice, and then I decide, you know what, I need to step away for a while, or I need to exit out of the screen. Any changes that I made, I can go ahead and save them, and then I can come back later on and I can continue forward. You can always view the notes, the ones that you saw pop up, or add a new note if I want. You can reject an invoice. Rejecting an invoice does not necessarily mean I reject it and I've sent it all the way back to where it originated, maybe in accounting. What rejecting means is that I want to reject it maybe back to one of the previous approvers. So you have a choice when you reject. Routing here means I'm routing this outside the flow loop. So in other words, I'm not routing it to another person who's in the workflow. I'm routing it maybe I'm the only person that needs to review and approve this invoice today. But I want to route it to the purchasing manager. I'd like that person to take a look at it as well. I can put it on hold, and I can also email right from here. So if I wanted to email a copy of this invoice to someone else, I can go ahead and do so, and I can specify who I want to send it to, and then I just hit send, and it will email it out for me. Now, I mentioned I logged in on a web browser, but I'm going to just change the format here for a second. And if you just pardon all of this, we'll call it programmer's gobbledygook here on the right-hand side, I've now switched the format. So I'm now working off of an iPad, for example. So I still have enough real estate where I see these control buttons across the top, but not quite enough real estate to be able to actually display that particular menu item. So instead, if I just hover the mouse, it's telling me what it is. So I could do that. I could approve invoices using an iPad. So instead of me being in the office to approve my invoices, maybe I'm at home. I open up my iPad. I can go ahead and I can approve my invoices that way. Or even better, let's say that I'm at the job and I pulled the invoice up on my phone. So now I've shrunk the format down so it's working off of the phone. The only thing that I don't have is I don't have a cross top here. I don't have those control buttons. So instead, what happens is they're embedded into these buttons at the top and bottom. So I could see it this way, or, you know, I could pull it up here. And then if I want, I can go through and, you know, change the distribution or do whatever I want off my phone. So this is Timberscan Go. This is giving me the ability to approve using any type of mobile I want. And the system just fits your particular invoice format to whatever that particular device is. Now, for those people who are current Timberscan users, I'll just mention that what our development is centered around a lot of the things that you're seeing here. So going forward, we're going to allow you the ability to have a lot more of the Timberscan functionality in this format, in a web browser format like this, so that you know, instead of being on, if, you know, some people look at this and they say, you know what, instead of me having to do this off of quote unquote my desktop, what I would prefer to do is I prefer to work more in a browser format like this. So this is where the development of Timberscan is going. And you'll have the option. You could say, I want to be able to do, you know, some people want to be able to use this. Other people still want to use this. And you'll have the option of doing this either way. Okay, so let's say that we're at the point where we've approved some invoices. They've come back. They've gone through final review. And now we've passed those invoices off to Sage 300. The last step in Sage 300 is those invoices get posted, and then your financials are updated. Okay, so let's say that we're at the point where you've gone through and you started processing checks. As I mentioned, regardless of whether you print your checks out on CheckStock or whether you're using something like Puricle's Create a Check, you can take those checks and you can ripple through an entire batch of checks and attach them to the invoice. If you're doing this through a printed check, it's this format. If you're using you know, something like Create a Check, it's using the auto attach function. Either way, what it ultimately allows you to do is inside Sage 300, I can call whether I'm in job cost, I'm in general ledger, or I'm in AP. I can come in here and I could drill down to the details like I'm going to do right now for power equipment rental. And we'll scroll down to invoice 24011, call up the invoice. And what I see is the invoice image. I have all of the supporting documents behind the invoice, all the way down to the check. And it's linked to this paperclip automatically from Timberscan. Okay, so we've talked about, we've spent quite a bit of time on the workflow of Timberscan, and we have about 7 minutes to the top of the hour. So I want to talk about some of the other features of Timberscan outside of AP routing and approval. I mentioned Timberscan AIM, Advanced Image Management. I know that just from querying some of our clients, that a lot of our clients aren't necessarily using Timberscan AIM per se. This is a document repository. I could take any document and I could just grab it, drag and drop it, and I could attach and I could start indexing it right here on the fly. So if I said that this were an HR document and it happened to be whatever it is, I can just go ahead and I can start indexing that document and I can save it. If you want to create workflows around those documents, you can do that. What it gives you is the ability to compile all of your documents in one repository. So now if I said I want to go in here and I want to pull up all of my documents for a particular job, we're in the middle of a job audit, and I need to go pull up everything. So I could say, give me everything where the job is 03001, and I've compiled everything together. So now I have all my job photos, my owner change orders, my project checklist, my POs, my invoices, and you can download this. There's also a spreadsheet format like you saw before that I can pull the information up in that format as well. I'm going to come back to Timberscan AIM in a couple moments, but I want to spend the last 5 minutes talking about core cloud systems. So I mentioned that we also have an out-of-the-box forms tool. That's where core cloud systems comes into play. So what core cloud systems allows you to do is you can go in and you can set up your own forms. So instead of someone, let's say, let's use an example. Let's say that you have people who are purchasing items on company credit card. So then they need to be reimbursed. So instead of them having to fill out an Excel spreadsheet, for example, or some other form that's on your desktop that has no integration whatsoever to it, and have to submit something like that, or maybe it's done manually. Timberscan, the Core Cloud Systems application, allows me to go set up my own forms. So I can go in here, I can create a form, and then from that form, I can deploy that form out to whoever it is that I wanted to see that particular form, and then they can fill it out. And again, just like you saw with Timberscan Go a couple of moments ago, it's not just something that I can do on my desktop. It's something that I could do, using any type of a mobile device. So again, this can be designed so that it can work in any format that you want, not just off your desktop. Now, built around the Forms tool are some applications that we've designed. I went into Forms here, so you can see basically I could just go in, I could create my own form, and I'll just bring one up here. So let's say it's a, I won't take much time doing this, but let's say it's a purchase order form. So what I can do is I can go in and set up my own form. I can set up my own questions and answers, if you will, off the form. And this is a wizard that's allowing me to go through and specify what I want in the form. And then from here, each of these particular fields, if you want, you can create a link to Sage 300. So I can say, I want to pull the cost code information from the Sage 300 cost code file. So it gives me that capability. Okay, so with this, let's go back here to home for a second. I mentioned that we also have some programs or some tools that we built. We have a credit card reconciliation program. I'm just going to quickly go in here and explain how this works. So let's just say that someone has filled out a form. They purchased some items on a credit card. They filled out the credit card form. They sent it in. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I went in, I've downloaded the American Express statement. When I pull it up, I see my statements here on the left. I see here are the receipts that people have submitted on the right. And then as I go through and reconcile, it will start to drop those particular reconciled items down here in the reconciled area. And then if I need to code it, I can. Or if the information's already there, it will just drop it right down for me. Ultimately, what this allows me to do, once I've reconciled my credit card receipts, I click on the Transfer to Timberscan button. It creates a fully coded invoice in Timberscan. So if I go back in here, call up, I'm just going to call up a particular invoice for a second. And we're going to do by specific vendor this time. Oops. It's this one right here. There we go. So I could create the invoice, I could reconcile the transactions through Core Cloud. And as soon as I hit transfer to Timberscan, it then takes that particular transaction, creates an invoice for me, and it's all fully coded. So again, and behind it, I have all of the credit card receipts and transactions that people have submitted, all attached. This is done. So again, we're talking about eliminating the steps of having to go through coding and what have you. So I've now created this invoice right off of the credit card statement and processing it through Timberscan.